History taught the world to fear Rome, the empire that crushed kingdoms, the empire that conquered continents, the empire that made entire civilizations disappear. But hidden beneath the sands of Africa, there was one empire Rome could not break. An empire so rich, so powerful, so fearless, that even Roman emperors feared going to war with it. And leading that empire were warrior queens. Queens who rode into battle. Queens who destroyed Roman armies. Queens who refused to kneel. Most people have never heard their names, because history almost erased them. This was the Empire of Kush, and its story changes everything you thought you knew about the ancient world. Tonight, we uncover the lost African superpower buried beneath the desert, the warrior queen who humiliated Rome, the forgotten pyramids larger than Egypt's, the secret wealth that made emperors desperate, and the terrifying reason this empire vanished from history. But here's the craziest part. For centuries, Rome told the world it conquered everyone. That was a lie, because deep in Africa, Rome met an enemy it could not control, and the woman leading that resistance became a legend. When people think about ancient civilizations, most imagine Rome, Greece, Egypt, but almost nobody talks about Kush, and that is one of the greatest historical mysteries of all time. Because for over 1,000 years, Kush was one of the most powerful empires on Earth. Located in what is now Sudan, the Kingdom of Kush controlled vital trade routes linking Central Africa, Egypt, the Red Sea, and the Mediterranean world. This was not a small tribe. This was not a forgotten village. This was a superpower. Its cities were filled with temples. Its kings ruled vast territories. Its armies terrified enemies. Its wealth attracted merchants from across the world. Gold, ivory, ebony, iron, exotic animals, rare incense. Everything flowed through Kush, and the Nile River became the artery of its power. But Kush did not begin as an empire. At first, it lived in Egypt's shadow. For centuries, Egypt viewed Nubia, the land of Kush, as both a rival and a treasure chest. Egyptian pharaohs invaded repeatedly. They wanted Kush's gold, its resources, its trade routes. And for a time, Egypt dominated the region. But then something incredible happened. Kush adapted. The Kushites learned from Egypt. They mastered architecture, religion, military organization, government, writing. Then one day, the student became stronger than the master. Around the 8th century BCE, Kush rose. And under King Paye, it invaded Egypt itself. Imagine that. The civilization most people think of as unbeatable was conquered by an African empire from the south. Kushite kings marched north. They seized Egyptian cities. They took control of the Nile. And eventually, they ruled Egypt. Historians call them the Black Pharaohs, but their story is rarely told, because it disrupts the version of history many people grew up hearing. The Kushite rulers didn't just imitate Egypt, they revived it. At a time when Egypt was fractured and weak, the Kushite pharaohs restored stability. They rebuilt temples, honored ancient traditions, and unified territories. For decades, they ruled one of the largest empires in the ancient world. But empires always attract enemies. And from the east, a terrifying force was coming. The Assyrians. The Assyrians were ruthless. They burned cities, massacred enemies, destroyed kingdoms, and eventually, they pushed Kush out of Egypt. But Kush survived. Instead of collapsing, it moved south, and there, it became even stronger. The capital shifted to Meroë, and Meroë would become one of the richest cities in Africa. Iron furnaces glowed through the night. Trade caravans crossed the deserts. Massive pyramids rose into the sky. Yes, pyramids, not Egyptian pyramids, Kushite pyramids, more than 200 of them. In fact, Sudan today contains more pyramids than Egypt, yet most people have never seen them. That's how completely this empire vanished from mainstream history. But Kush was not vanishing yet, because its greatest challenge was still coming. Rome. By the 1st century BCE, Rome was becoming unstoppable. One by one, kingdoms fell. Gaul, Greece, Carthage, Egypt. Rome consumed them all. And after the defeat of Cleopatra and Mark Antony, Egypt officially became a Roman province. Now Rome stood directly beside Kush, and Rome wanted more. The Romans had heard stories of gold, stories of African wealth, stories of powerful cities beyond the desert. To Roman emperors, Kush looked like a prize waiting to be taken. But Rome misunderstood something critical. Kush was not weak. Its warriors were battle-hardened. Its economy was thriving. Its people understood the desert better than any foreign army. And perhaps most importantly, Kush was led by rulers unlike anyone Rome had faced before. Warrior queens, the Candaces. This title referred to powerful royal women who could rule independently. Not ceremonial queens, not symbolic wives, actual rulers, military leaders, strategists, commanders, and one Candace in particular would become Rome's nightmare. Her name was Amanirenas. Roman historians described her as fierce, fearless, unbreakable. According to ancient accounts, she may have lost an eye in battle. But if Rome believed injury would weaken her, Rome made a fatal mistake. Because Amanirenas was not preparing to surrender, she was preparing for war. Most kingdoms feared Rome. Amanirenas attacked it. Around 24 BCE, while Rome was distracted by conflicts elsewhere, Kush struck first. Kushite forces swept north into Roman-controlled Egypt. Roman forts were attacked, cities were raided, statues of Emperor Augustus were destroyed. According to legend, Amanirenas took a bronze head of Augustus. She buried it beneath a temple staircase. Every person entering the temple would step on Rome's emperor. Think about how insulting that was. This wasn't just military resistance, it was psychological warfare. A direct message: Rome is not feared here. The Romans were furious, and Rome responded the only way it knew how, with overwhelming force. The Roman governor Petronius launched a counterattack. Legions marched south, villages burned, cities fell. The Romans believed Kush would collapse like every other kingdom. But Kush fought back, again and again and again. The deeper Roman forces moved into Nubia, the harder the war became. Heat, distance, desert terrain, supply problems, ambushes. Kushite warriors knew the land, Rome did not, and Amanirenas refused to submit. Even after Roman advances, Kush continued resisting. Eventually, the conflict reached a turning point. Rome realized something disturbing. Conquering Kush would be extremely expensive, maybe impossible. This was not another easy campaign, and Rome was already stretched across multiple fronts. So instead of total conquest, Rome negotiated. Think about that. Rome, the empire that conquered nations across Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, was forced into diplomacy with Kush. That almost never happened. The resulting peace treaty was astonishingly favorable to Kush. Rome reduced demands, border territories were adjusted, taxes were lifted, and Kush remained independent. Independent. That single word changes everything. Because while many civilizations fell beneath Roman expansion, Kush survived. Amanirenas had done the impossible. She stood against Rome and lived. Roman eagle falls into sand. Amanirenas raises her spear. Roman soldiers retreat. Bronze Augustus' head is buried underground. Rome couldn't break them. To understand why Kush was so powerful, you have to understand Meroë. This city was extraordinary. For centuries, Meroë became the beating heart of Kushite civilization. And unlike many ancient capitals, it was strategically brilliant. Protected by desert, connected to trade routes, rich in resources, especially iron. Massive furnaces operated constantly. Historians sometimes call Meroë the Birmingham of ancient Africa. Iron weapons, iron tools, iron production on an industrial scale. This gave Kush military strength, economic power, influence across the region. But Meroë wasn't only about war, it was beautiful. Temples covered in carvings, royal palaces, ceremonial avenues, massive pyramids, and these pyramids were different from Egypt's. Steeper, narrower, distinctly Kushite. Each one represented royal authority, legacy power. Yet for centuries, outsiders barely studied them. Looted, damaged, ignored. One treasure hunter in the 1800s literally blasted apart pyramids searching for gold. Imagine destroying one of the world's greatest archaeological sites for quick profit. That's how little the world valued Kush at the time. But beneath the sand, its story survived. And the more archaeologists uncovered, the more shocking the truth became. Kush was not isolated, it was globally connected. Trade networks stretched deep into Africa, toward Arabia, toward India, toward the Mediterranean. Exotic animals were exported, luxury goods traveled north, gold flowed through kingdoms. Kush was wealthy because it sat at the crossroads of civilizations. And at the center of all this power stood its rulers, including its queens. One of the most fascinating parts of Kushite civilization was the role of women, because in many ancient societies, women were excluded from power, not in Kush. The Candaces held enormous authority. Some ruled beside kings, others ruled independently, some commanded armies. Greek and Roman writers repeatedly mentioned powerful Kushite queens. This shocked outsiders, because Rome itself remained overwhelmingly male-dominated. But Kush operated differently. Royal women influenced politics, religion, military decisions, dynastic succession, and this wasn't symbolic. These women shaped history. Amanirenas became legendary because she fought Rome. But she was not alone. Other Candaces ruled across generations. Amanishaketo, Amanitore, Nawidemak. Their monuments still stand today. Their pyramids still rise from the desert. Their inscriptions still survive. And yet, most school systems barely mention them. Why? Partly because ancient African history was neglected for centuries. Partly because colonial narratives focused heavily on Europe. And partly because Kush's written language remains only partially understood. That means entire stories may still be buried beneath the sand. Think about that. There may be forgotten battles, forgotten rulers, forgotten achievements we still haven't uncovered. The desert is hiding history, and every new excavation changes what we know. But while Kush flourished for centuries, no empire lasts forever, because slowly, the world around it began changing. Trade routes shifted, enemies evolved, internal pressures grew, and eventually, Kush began to weaken. History rarely ends with a single dramatic moment. Empires usually fade slowly, and Kush was no exception. Over time, trade routes shifted away from Meroë. Economic pressure increased. Environmental changes may have damaged agriculture. Iron production may have contributed to deforestation, and new regional powers emerged. One kingdom in particular, Aksum, located in what is now Ethiopia and Eritrea. Aksum was rising fast. It controlled trade, expanded militarily, and challenged Kush's dominance. Eventually, Kush collapsed. By around the 4th century CE, its power had faded, cities declined, political authority fragmented, and slowly, the desert reclaimed what remained. Temples disappeared beneath sand. Trade routes vanished. The world moved on. And then something even stranger happened. People forgot. An empire that once challenged Rome was barely remembered. Its queens vanished from textbooks. Its achievements were ignored. Its pyramids stood in silence. For centuries, the world focused elsewhere, until archaeologists began uncovering the truth. And that truth was stunning, because Kush forces us to rethink ancient history itself. Africa was not isolated. Africa was not passive. Africa was not waiting for civilization. Kush proves ancient Africa contained empires, innovation, military power, global trade, complex governments, and leaders capable of confronting the greatest powers on earth, including Rome. Here's the twist. The biggest mystery about Kush is not how it rose, it's why so many people never learned about it. Because this story should be world famous. A wealthy African empire, Black Pharaohs ruling Egypt, warrior queens defeating Roman expansion, hundreds of pyramids, massive trade networks. That sounds like something Hollywood would make 10 movies about. Yet for generations, Kush remained on the margins of mainstream history. Why? Part of the answer lies in archaeology. Many Kushite sites remained difficult to access. Some were destroyed, others stayed buried. But another reason involves historical bias. For a long time, many historians focused overwhelmingly on Europe and the Mediterranean. African civilizations were often minimized, ignored, treated as secondary. That distorted global understanding of history. Because civilizations like Kush were not exceptions, Africa contained kingdoms, empires, trade systems, universities, architectural wonders, military powers, but too often, those stories were pushed aside, and that's beginning to change. Today, new discoveries continue emerging from Sudan. Archaeologists uncover temples, artifacts, royal tombs, ancient inscriptions. Every excavation adds another piece to the puzzle. And slowly, the lost empire returns. Not from myth, from evidence, from stone, from history itself. The Empire of Kush matters for more than historical curiosity. It matters because forgotten history changes how we see the world. For centuries, people were taught simplified versions of the past. But history is bigger than that. More connected, more complex, more surprising. Kush reminds us that greatness has never belonged to one civilization, not one continent, not one people, not one empire. And perhaps the most powerful symbol of all was Amanirenas, a queen who looked at the most feared empire on earth and refused to bow. Even now, thousands of years later, her story survives, buried beneath desert sands, carved into ancient stone, whispered through ruined pyramids. Rome became legend, but Kush became mystery. And sometimes, mysteries are even more powerful. The next time someone tells you ancient history was shaped by only a few civilizations, remember Kush. Remember the Black Pharaohs. Remember Meroë. Remember the warrior queens. And remember the empire Rome could not erase. Because history still hides incredible stories beneath the surface. And this was only one of them. If you enjoyed this documentary, make sure to subscribe, because we're uncovering the forgotten empires, hidden wars, and untold stories the world was never supposed to forget. Comment below. Did you know about the Empire of Kush before this video? And what forgotten civilization should we uncover next? If this story shocked you, share this documentary with someone who loves history. Because the past is far stranger and far more powerful than most people realize. Until next time, keep questioning the stories history tells and the ones it doesn't.